This
I retired
conference will now be recorded.
after 30 years. Now I'm on the other end of it. So I'm going to be doing some in-services for you guys about various topics that have been identified for me that might be helpful. And so today we're going to start just at the baseline. We're going to start at developing a therapeutic relationship. Often people take for granted just by being in contact with another person, they're have a relationship with them. And the word relationship is very broad. So the key being a provider, being whether you're a social worker, case manager, group home staff, human service agent, probation agent, a therapeutic relationship is going to really make the experience easier. And I say, rather than say make the job easier, I mean make the experience easier because it carries beyond the work hours. Make sense? Okay. So in front of you, there is just a real short worksheet if you want to just take some notes. Some people do, some people don't, but I always find them helpful. And I'm an office supply geek, so you'll find these with them. So, all right. So just to start, when we talk about rapport, it's a state of being. It's, when I establish rapport with someone, I don't have to have any investment in them. I don't have to invest in them at all. I don't have to have an emotional connection. I just have to have a standard box of rules. Okay, so if I develop rapport with a coworker, it means that I can do the job effectively in their company, in cooperation with them. I don't have to like or dislike them. I don't have to call them on the weekends. I don't have to do anything with them. It's simply a cooperative relationship. Okay. So establishing rapport with a patient, however, is bound to be with an emotional component because you find dependence, you find like, you find dislike, you find anger, you find every human emotion known to man, both from the client and at times from the provider. Okay, and that's something that a lot of people don't want to often admit, but we're all human, the client and the provider as well. So emotional rapport or rapport that involves emotions cannot be established without what's called client-centered approach. A client-centered approach is putting the needs of the client first within your scope of practice so that you don't provide any false information, so that you have their best interest at heart, so that you are informed on what the goals are regarding treatment or placement or whatever the case may be. Okay, client-centered also means client-driven. A client is not put in here with the intent that the provider is going to do everything for them. Okay, so the client, they have the motivation or not. Okay, we're going to talk about the word insight, but they have the insight or not. And I use that word carefully, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And so client-centered on an emotional level builds the relationship. Okay, so rapport, you don't necessarily need an emotional connection. You just need to be able to work cooperatively together. To move into relationship with the emotional part, that's where the game changes. Okay, now reasonable? Reasonable? Okay. So relationships are in motion at all times, whether it be in your company or not in your company. Okay, as a case manager or provider, even with your educators, with your families, that radar is on all the time, whether we want to believe it or not. That's why when the phone rings and you see somebody's number, you emotionally react one way or another. And think about a variety of phone calls you could get. If you get a call from the credit agency, that holds your card, if you get a call from a family member when they're supposed to be indisposed at the moment. Okay, if you get a call from a client when they're supposed to be in a psychiatric appointment, when you get a call from a client when they're supposed to be in their room down the hall. Okay, so those are those are factors that we have to consider. Our personal life and our professional life, they do bleed together, and we're going to talk about, kind of the pros and cons of that as well. Okay. So therapeutic relationship, therapeutic means helpful or healing. The first part of therapeutic is therapy, healing. That's the purpose of therapy. So therapeutic means promoting wellness. Okay. I need to have a degree of wellness myself to promote wellness. Okay. So, as we go down these in-services and things, we're going to talk about, care for self, not only as a provider, but person, applying some of the therapeutic techniques that we use with clients to ourselves. Because again, we're all in that human emotional realm. Okay. So promote wellness in our relationship with the client means being an example of it as well. Okay, and we'll talk about what that means a little more. So too often the first, and I talk from my experience at the left inpatient environment and doing some outpatient AODA and mental health. So, and I did it too. From the first contact with the client, I would often say, "Hi, I'm Debbie Wagner. I'll be your social worker." Okay. I'm Debbie Wagner. That's who I am. I'm your social worker. Automatically puts me in a box. Okay. I'm Molly. I'm your case manager. Automatically puts you in a box. So case Molly might mean, human being, somebody I'm going to work with. Case manager means the rule maker. I'm the rule breaker. Might mean the person who reports to XYZ. And so often the person will know who you are when the meeting is arranged. Just try and introduce yourself by your first name and then say, you may have been told I'm your case manager. Okay. If you can put a face to a name and your name as a human being without your role, just for even that millisecond, it's going to make a difference. Okay. Can you see why it might? Why, Mama? What do you think?
Well, as a case manager, that brings a whole lot to the table. I'm the rule enforcer. I report to the probation agent, and I have a lot of power over that person. If they mess up, I could revoke them and send them back to the locked unit.
Yep, absolutely. And so the point that you make a good point, because there is automatically in a relationship with a client, an automatic power differential, okay? And it's perceived, but system-wide, it's literal. It really is literal. Because you have control in a person's life to some degree at all times, okay? Whether it be the big picture of reputation or the small picture of you need to be in my office at this time, or you need to go into an intoxilizer before you can get in the vehicle, or so it's by degree, it's on a continuum, but that power differential is always there, and that's something you need to be consciously aware of throughout your time, both at work and outside of work, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Okay. So power differential, the power that a person has, and 99.9% of the time it is never intentional. It can be misused. Okay, it's easy to have happen. If I'm working in a group home setting, okay, and somebody is not following a rule that might put me or someone else at risk, then automatically that power and that position is going to make itself known. Okay, immediately, because there's a safety issue. More subtly, if I hold a position in a group home and there's a rule about when the TV goes off at night at 9 o'clock and somebody turns off their TV at 9:10, the client or the person may think, oh, they didn't say anything. So it's a little bit of a challenge next time. Maybe it'll be 12 minutes. Okay. And in your position, you may say, ooh, I'm 10 minutes late. I need to follow these guidelines because my supervisor says, so, or not. And so when the power differential, when it can be misused, is when the heavy hand comes down. One thing that I found at Winnebago, and I made these mistakes. I mean, I made them. That's how I learned. Is an absolute very rarely works. Okay. And what I mean is, if I say there will be no striking of another human being, well, if somebody's really angry, well, yeah, you think, and then it might happen. But if I say to the person, I'm going to ask you to entertain the thought of what would happen if you hit something. Okay. I'm not the heavy anymore. I'm handing it over to the client for consideration, and then they own it. Okay. So then if they strike out at someone, I asked you to think about the consequences. Maybe you'll think about it next time. Now it's theirs. Okay, I can't be held responsible. So often I'm a real big one for saying, I'd ask you to think about, or can I make a suggestion, or can I give you some feedback? It automatically hands things over because you're going to listen to it. You're going to give me permission to offer it. Okay. And if it's not something that needs to be communicated, absolutely. If the person says, I don't want to hear what you have to hear, okay, I'll bring it back later. Because if they don't want to hear it, I'm not going to make noise for them not to digest it. Does that make sense? And that's how we get in a cycle of going around and around and around and around. Well, I told you this the last time we met. So if somebody blocks that out and they don't want to hear it, then we start. Okay. So when you meet with a new client, starting with introductions, your name, try and personalize it first. With that power differential, our jobs can be very frustrating, but it can be extremely frustrating on the side of the client as well. Okay. Now, acknowledging and validating the power that the client has, this is their life. They're going to make the choices. Okay. I can't make you do anything. I can't make you feel a certain way, but then that goes the other way too. Too often you hear staff saying, oh God, they made me so mad. Well, I'm going to choose any reaction I have to a behavior. And if somebody does not follow a rule in the program, that has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. Okay? It's about that person choosing to follow the rule of the program. Okay? What I have to do as a result of that might make my job more difficult. Well, for you. All of us, if we think about in our positions, when it gets tough, it's not going to be tough when everything's going along smooth, is it? And so being ready to own that kind of experience as yours, the frustration, okay, and to let the client's decisions be the client's decisions. I can have the best rapport with someone in the world and I can't make them do a darn thing. I can't. And when we talk in further in services about personality disorders and things, that's where we can get caught up. For example, if a client says, you're the only one who understands me and that's why I did this for you. And we'll talk more about that. That's part of that relationship that goes in all the directions. Okay. And that's also part of the radar. Okay. So this is where we start, in contact with the client, whether it be in person, on the phone, by letter, over email, through a second party or a third party. Okay. Any communication is communication. If I'm walking down the street, which has happened, and I see a past client, just a glance, and there's going to be some kind of thought there, some kind of communication there. Sometimes the client will cross the street and greet me, sometimes they won't. And so think about how that carries over the broad picture. It's not just I go to work from 7:45 to 4:30. This is a part of my bigger life as well. And we'll talk more about that too. We'll talk about, how often do you carry things home? And those things, those in-services are coming down the way as But you're, hopefully, I'll be able to assist you in seeing how all this is connected. Okay. People too often think, oh, a therapeutic relationship is a lot different than my role as a case manager, is a lot different than testifying in court, is a lot different than, but you'll see that it's all connected. Okay. And it's all connected simply because we're living and breathing. Does that make sense? Okay, so too often there's terms that are used that can automatically cause the power differential and the poor likelihood of developing a good working relationship go like this. And the first one is compliance. Okay, you hear that word all the time. Rule compliant, medication compliant. Okay, just as an example, medications, I use the word adherent because adhering to the direction of the doctor is different than being compliant to your rules. Okay, totally different picture. And so thinking about the terms that we use is going to be huge. And compliance is a big one. Another one that is a big one is manipulative. Okay? That term is used so frequently. And what does it mean, really? Manipulative, what does it mean? It means something different to every single person. It might mean they're trying to talk me into an extra XYZ. It might mean that, they're trying to avoid XYZ. But the common denominator is I'm saying it's all about me again. And their behavior has nothing to do with me. So manipulative automatically connects it to me, and I personalize, okay, because it's a negative term, okay. It's a condescending term to a person if I say that to them, okay. And then there goes the rapport, there goes the relationship, okay. And you can have a relationship without rapport. POs and clients, you can have a relationship without, or rapport without having a relationship. Rapport, I can work cooperatively with the IRS. I have no emotional connection, and I might even feel a little icky toward them, okay? But to have a relationship, a true relationship, you have to have rapport. Does that make sense? Okay. So the other thing too that, and we'll get back to terms in a minute, but establishing a relationship with a client is they have a right to know what your role is. They have a right to know what you don't know, but they're only going to know that if you tell them. If they come and ask you a question, don't pretend you know the answer or give part of it, okay? Because that gives a totally different picture. If you don't know something, say, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. And if I can't find out, I'll refer you to somebody who can. There's no sin in that, okay? And many times, a token of respect will be earned by admitting what you're not, okay? And I saw that so many times at Winnebago, not just in my own experience, but with other staff. Because people make assumptions just based on your title, how qualified you are, how competent you are, how friendly you are. If I say I'm Debbie and I'm your probation agent, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be perceived as less friendly than, hi, I'm Debbie and I'm your pastor. See what I mean? So when you identify yourself, identify your role very clearly. This is what I can do for you. This is what I can't do for you. But we need to work together to get what needs to be done. Okay? I say to clients, even now in outpatient, I can never work harder than you do. That's a key phrase that I use. But then I couple that by saying, but in a lot of situations, I don't expect you to work harder than I do in what we have to accomplish. And that goes back to that power differential, okay? And I've gotten pretty good response from that because I can't work harder than you do. I'll do my job, but I can't do for you what you need to do yourself. That's what that translates to. Okay. So coming to work and you had a terrible night, you slept terrible, your child was up all night or your dog messed the rug, whatever the case may be, and the first person you have at 8 a.m. is somebody that has challenged you and challenged you and challenged you. Do not ever think for a minute that the dog soiling the rug does not affect how you see that person at 8 a.m. Don't ever fool yourself into thinking that. Because all it would take is one comment, and my irritability about the dog soiling the rug is going to be triggered. Okay? And that's part of the human condition. Okay? So it means being aware of ourselves and where are we at that moment. If I'm engaged, and I think most frequently about my time at Winnebago, if things started to escalate and I could feel myself escalating, there is nothing wrong with, if you're able to do it, just, why don't we take a break? I'm going to go use the restroom. I mean, who's going to deny you that? Who's going to deny you that? And then you just check yourself. If a client is escalating, you may say, let's take a break. Why don't you go get something to drink if you want something? We'll come back in a minute. It'll give them a chance to check themselves. You can recheck yourself. Okay? That's the way this is going to continue to be productive. If things start to escalate and I say, okay, well, you don't need to be upset about that right now. Let's get this done. Okay? Game over. Okay? Really, you're already behind the 8 ball. And so pay attention. Pay attention. And trying to do too many things at the same time with a client confuses you, and it can be overwhelming to them, and it causes anxiety on both sides. Okay. And again, your personal experience is going to look different in all these areas, but keep your eyes and ears open, but also keep your mind open, because you're not perfect, they're not perfect, nobody's perfect. Okay. And that's, again, part of the human condition. Okay. So then when you're interviewing someone, rather than sit down and say, well, there's some paperwork we need to get done, now that we're just first working together, tell them what the purpose of the paperwork is. Tell them, where is it going to go? Who's going to see it? Too often it's almost like those things are secretive. And it takes the client saying, well, who's going to see this if I answer these questions? Tell them right off the front gate. And I would venture to guess in some cases that will increase the chance of, there you go. That'll increase the chance of engagement by the client. Okay. So from the front gate, answer some of the questions they might have. Okay. So the other thing too is that, before you start your day, sometimes it's helpful just when you wake up, just to kind of set an intention for the day. I did that when I worked at Winnebago, where if I did something on Tuesday that I wasn't proud of, I set the intention for the day to do everything in my power not to repeat that. And if we repeat behaviors, if I say to someone when they first meet with me, there's some paperwork that we need to complete now that you're here, I do that 6 times and I form the habit. Okay? I form that 21 times, or I do that 21 times and it's a fixed behavior. If I say, welcome to wherever, or I'm looking forward to working with you, we need to talk about your history, just for the record, I'm going to be, these are the people that will see it, blah, 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 this is the purpose of it. Do that 6 times, okay? It's going to be a familiar habit. Do that 21 times, it's a fixed behavior, okay? So you don't always have to work so hard to say the right thing, okay? Which can really be stress-inducing, okay? Another common denominator with all this stuff is if we can make just these subtle changes, it's going to reduce our chronic anxiety level, which is a given in this type of position and in just day-to-day life. You know, we all carry a little bit of chronic anxiety. And in caregiver positions, it can flare and look so differently than in real life, or in our personal life, not real life. Okay. So the client can benefit and it can improve the relationship for them to know what to expect of you. It is not unreasonable to ask the client, so what do you expect from me? What do you need from me? Those are two different questions. Okay. What do you need from me? That may have to do more with my role. Okay. What do you expect from me? Well, I expect you to treat me with respect. I expect me to tell you when you can't do something. I expect you to be nice to me. Okay. Those can be answers that a person needs too. But if you think about it, if I say to a person, what do you expect from me? It opens it up to the personal relationship. What do you need from me? It keeps it in a box of a job. Does that make sense? Now, again, when we're talking about personality disorders, and we talk about borderline personality disorder, the word need, we're going to look at that, okay? And we're going to also look at expect, because it can mean different things in different situations, okay? So too often the power differential causes an us and them, okay? There's automatically going to be some degree of that, simply because of the roles we hold, okay? So when that disappears, that's when a boundary has been crossed. Okay. There is the case manager and the client. Okay. I work cooperatively, but I am not your friend. Okay. I can be friendly. I can be funny. I can be caring. Okay. But once it becomes blurred, that boundary has been crossed. And we'll talk about that down the road too in other services and how that is outwardly evident and inwardly evident. Okay. So asking a client what they can expect or what their expectations of you are. There's also a question that you can ask about, well, what would you like to see me doing for you? Often that can be a really good question because people who have expectations of you doing for them what they need to do for themselves can become evident. Okay. So how you ask things is not only going to change the relationship, it's going to really make your role clearer. Okay. And it's going to help you set those boundaries and those expectations. Okay. Okay. So let's go back. On the sheet, there's a list of words that we want to avoid. Okay. We talked about compliance a little bit. Compliance means I will follow your rules. Cooperative means I'll work with you and maybe we can come to the same ends and means. Okay. And they feel different, don't they? If I say compliant and if I say cooperative, do those physically feel different when you hear them? They do. You know, cooperative is a little softer. It means engaged with. Okay. Compliant means my behavior, in compliance with rules, me solely. Okay. Cooperative means I'm working with you to meet the ends. Okay. Manipulative, we talked a little bit about that, is just such a stigmatizing word, and it is commonly used in response to opposing behavior, whatever that may be. And remember that in our relationship with a client, there's things that we want too. It's not just things that the client wants. If I say, oh, he or she is so manipulative, you know, it's always their agenda. Well, guess what? I have an agenda too. Okay? I do. I have work expectations that need to be fulfilled. I have rules to be followed. Okay. So I could be called manipulative as well. If I need something from you, it's very likely that I'm going to present myself in a certain way. Okay. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, think about, as we're talking about this stuff, think about a situation just in your personal experience, and it doesn't have to be with a client. How many times do parents manipulate children into behaving? I mean, that's a very just common example. Okay. And for those of us who aren't parents, I'm not a parent, I might do it with a coworker. If I want something from you, or I need your help with something, I'm going to present myself in a certain way. So am I manipulative, or am I getting the job done? You know, that's for you to decide. See how it feels. Disabled, that term is becoming more and more abrasive to people because it really means without ability. Okay. So ask the person, you know, I tend to use the word condition, okay? A mental health condition instead of a mental health disability, or, you know, barriers. I'll use the word barrier very often. You know, there might be a barrier to doing something, okay? If I am paralyzed from the waist down, okay? Is it a barrier to me doing certain things? Maybe, okay? If I say it's a disability, that's about me. If I say barrier, that's about a condition. Does that make sense? So, you know, choose your words carefully. And younger people are going to respond much more strongly to the word disability than maybe somebody my age, in my 50s, because it was very commonly used. And it was meant to be diagnostic almost when I was young. So the other one is needy. You know, it's funny because I say needy and I see some smirks, you know, and oh, they're so needy. Well, why? Why are they asking me for things? Is it because they don't have the means to get it? Is it because they're unwilling to go for it? Is it because they're unable to understand how to navigate the system to meet their need? Needy is extremely insulting. It is extremely insulting. And it also feeds your ego because that means that I am the giver. They need me. Okay? So that can jack you up a few steps. And in your career, you're going to find that once in a while, you know, that's going to help you get through your day. But you got to figure out, why am I feeling like that? Is it at the expense of the client or the patient? So needy is very frequently used, almost as often as manipulative, I would say. And the person can be doing the same thing, and you might use either word. It just depends on the situation. Okay. Insight. Now, insight can be a clinical term. You know, the client develops insight into maintaining a hygienic environment or a clean environment, okay? But when you turn that around and say they don't have any insight, sometimes that means they're not doing what I want them to do. Mm-hmm. Why haven't they developed insight? Why don't they have insight into this? Well, what are the barriers to them understanding? Mm-hmm. Insight, you know, it's about looking at what I know within, okay, and communicating what I know within. That's the word in. Sight means seeing. So what am I seeing inside of myself? Okay. So if I say to someone, you have no insight, is that accurate? No, it's not. I have insight according to my world. And this is how I understand things. Just because it's not according to my definition of what it should be does not mean it's not present. So I would ask that you reconsider using that word at all. Okay. And again, there are some places that use it very commonly as a clinical indicator. But again, it's according to a protocol, okay, or an expectation. So who can think of some words that you would use instead of insight? Yeah.
It's like, this is that person's truth. That's kind of what I say. It's like, it's when I disagree with, I have a borderline client, a client who has borderline personality disorder, and her version of events for things are often very different than my version of events. And I'm like, well, this is her truth. You have to be patient.
You know,
It may not be my truth, but it is her truth.
Yeah, and there are universal truths that are just are, okay? If there are universal truths, if I step into a busy street when the light is green and there are no spaces in between the cars, my truth is that I'm putting myself out there to be hurt, okay? So the truth of the environment is the likelihood of me getting hurt when the street is full of cars is extremely high, okay? So when you say that's their truth, my truth is only according to the reference I have. Yeah. And what's interesting is when you first started talking, you went, I have a client who's borderline, you know, and really think about how often and how frequently we use this language, you know, borderline, dependent, needy, manipulative. You know, when you think about all that, it's just, how do those words feel? You know, always ask yourself, do I want those terms used for me? Do I want to be seen as needy, manipulative, borderline? Because guess what, folks? We all have features of every single one. We do. I mean, it's who we are. So, so then consequence, that's the other one. Consequence, there's automatically a hammer in the picture, isn't there? Okay. So what about outcome? What about circumstances that result from? And this sounds like it's hard to change language, but it will make your day so much easier. I learned that many times the hard way, okay? The hard way. You know, in 30 years in the inpatient environment, I'm extremely fortunate because there were very few incidents where I was physically harmed, okay, over 30 years. And there were very few incidents where I didn't want to come to work, but there are a number of incidents when I went home and drove up. I drove home and cried all the way home, okay? And not because of what I did that day, but how I allowed that to affect me, okay? And that's how we talked about, it's not about me. I made it about me. You know, if I carry my day out the door and I cry all the way home, I made my day about me. And not only am I causing myself distress, I'm giving power where power need not be, okay? And I'm not owning my own stuff. So that's something to think about. So a strengths-based approach. What is a strengths-based approach to anybody?
Going off of the client's strengths and building goals off of their strengths as opposed to their needs.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can couple the two. Yeah. Setting not just the goals according to their strengths, but what you don't have to do for them. Okay? Don't automatically assume that you have to do everything for them. But you need to know the person well to know what their strengths are. And often past history will show you, okay? If I was able to live in a car for 7 days in the winter with $6 in my pocket, I've got a lot of strengths that can be carried forward for the rest of my life, okay? If I know how to utilize the bus system, that's a strength. Okay, if I can ask somebody how to teach me how to use the bus system, that's a strength. Okay, if I get out of bed in the morning and I shower, that's a strength. Okay, and that's a lot of other things too, but there are so many strengths a person can have. You know, when you think about situations of people who come from horrendous abuse histories, don't think for a minute that there are no strengths and skills developed in those environments. Too often, clinicians, myself included earlier in my career, you came from the point of deficit, okay? They were raised in a horrendous environment, so they are lacking, okay? So they're automatically behind the 8 ball. And you're automatically making your job more difficult because you're anticipating you're gonna have to do more than you need to do, okay? So strengths-based approach is the opposite of deficit, okay? So then you need to think about who the customers are, okay? Your client is your customer, right? Who else is a customer? Who else is your customer? No matter what position you're in, whether it be school or a group home setting or a case manager or a supervisor or who are your customers?
Everybody?
Who's everybody?
Everybody you come in contact with,
Why?
because the way they perceive you affects how everybody else would perceive you.
Okay, that's part of it. What would be another part of it? That's definitely part of it. No matter who I interact with in any given day, I provide a service. I went and filled my gas tank this morning, okay? When I paid the attendant, I provided a service. How? How did I provide a service?
Well, you paid for your gas, which puts money into the company, which pays the check of the person that was working.
And also allows the person to, you know, follow through on the expectations of the job. And so everything is transactional, and that's what relationship is, okay? People make fun of me because I know the first names often of the gas station attendants and the office people, woman in the copy center, you know, but that's important. Okay? If you can put a name to a face and use it, it's gonna make all the difference in the world, okay? I'm gonna respond much quicker if somebody calls me Debbie than if they call me ma'am. Or if I say, hi, how are you, and I don't use your name, how do you know I remember your name? Okay, so if I'm in a situation with a client and I can look them in the eye, which we'll also talk about eye contact, which is huge. If I can look someone in the eye and use their name, that is gonna leave an impression. And it's also gonna maintain a connection. Okay? Because I see you. Too often, people are not seen. And in some of your personal lives, you may also know what that experience is like. Think about it. What is it like to be seen? That's huge. So, other customers, let's do some specifics as far as your roles go.
As a supervisor or as an owner, mine is all about the contractor.
Okay,
We're providing a service that we know we need to deliver.
customer, definitely. Mark, who's one of your customers?
Well, I mean, it could potentially be like a PE or ancillary people that surround your client.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who are one of your customers? You're in school though, right? Okay, so who would be a customer?
Classmate.
Classmate, why? Absolutely.
Being in front of them and need help with something, you can definitely help them out.
Okay, cooperative relationship or a friendly relationship? Absolutely. Your customer is anyone you come into contact with. My coworker, my supervisor, the contract agency, the collateral resource that I utilize, okay? Everybody is your customer. And, you know, we say, provide good customer service. Think about what that means. I mean, if I treat people with respect, if I don't put my stuff on them, okay? If I am present during our contacts, and I'm not worried about the phone call that might come, if I see them, it's gonna make it easier for me, it's gonna make it easier for them, and it's gonna make the whole process clearer, okay? Too often when things get complicated, it's because there's emotions involved or there's stuff involved and in it that doesn't belong there. Oh, this is so complicated. Well, what do you need to take out of the scenario to make it clear? And with a client, ask them, why is this so difficult? You know, if there are challenges that you're finding with a client, ask them, why are we having such a hard time with this? Why are we not coming together on this? Ask for feedback. You are not the one all, true all, be all. You know, the client can help you as well. And there's just a lot of reward in really realizing that and applying that knowledge. Okay. Questions so far? Comments, concerns? Songs, lyrics? Okay. So we talk about who your customers are. The one thing that I really want to point out, and I put it in red, well, my copy's red, it's on the bottom of your handout, is that you and your client need one another. Okay? The client just doesn't need you. You need them too. Okay? And you need each other for different reasons, but also you need each other for some of the same reasons. What would those be that you can think of? Once I know all your names, it'll be so nice to go and call you guys by name and say, what do you think?
Did you ask us why we need our clients?
Yeah, why do you think you need your clients?
Mine is kind of super personal, but like, I used to be an addict, so working with people who have addiction, like, keeps me sober, reminds me all the time.
Okay, so it serves the purpose of reinforcing your recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all right. What else?
Sometimes you need clients to like give you a new perspective.
I think that's a great answer. Why else? What's a real baseline reason that you need your client?
I don't have clients, so I would be paying.
Bingo! Yeah, that's the starting point, isn't it? But there are many, many needs that we get fulfilled from our clients. That being said, that is also where boundaries come in. Okay? So knowing that there are needs that are met by my clients is important, because if you know that and if you know what those are, it unblurs some of the potential conflicts that could occur. Okay? You know, and we'll talk more about, you know, disclosure and how much do I tell a client about myself. If I am also in recovery, okay? If a client says to me now, how long have you been clean and sober? I say, just as long as you have. That's what I say. Just as long as you have. And they might be clean for a day. I've been clean for a day. Okay? So it helps that power differential. That's just another example of that. And it also kind of communicates humanness. I'm no better than you are. If you've been clean for a day and I've been clean for 15 years, how are you going to feel about me? So how long have you been clean and sober, Debbie? Well, just as long as you have. Think about it. Okay? So in that sense, I'm putting us on the same plane. Okay? And I'm not disclosing anything that just really doesn't have any room here. Okay? If I'm not in recovery and I'm working with an addict, does it make me less qualified? Absolutely not. So how are you gonna address that if it's challenged? Okay. Think about that. And those are other things that we'll talk about. There's so many topics that we can look at. And as you guys think of things, I really would ask you to communicate them to your supervisor or to whoever, you know, and say, this is what I'm wondering about. You know, ask questions. Figure out what you don't know and figure out what you need to relearn, according to what you think you know. We're all a work in progress. And there is no shame in at any time changing the way I do things to make myself better. Do them better. Okay? Just because I've always done it this way, it might really suck how I'm doing it, you guys. So isn't a change in order. Sometimes that means saving, kind of swallowing your pride. If I've always been a heavy and my reputation precedes me, that first client that I work with where I'm not like that, that's going to make a huge difference. And then it goes out on the web. And all of a sudden there's a different perception of it. Think about the clients that are defensive before you even meet them. Or you say, hi, I'm Debbie, I'll be your social worker. Yeah, I heard about you. So how are you going to address that? There were times where often my reputation on the unit preceded me for a variety of reasons. I'm kind of goofy, I like to laugh and, I carry a Curious George lunchbox, things like this. So a patient at the hospital might say, yeah, I heard about you. And I'm like, if you heard so much, what is my favorite color? And it totally disarms people, Don't be afraid to do that. But just make sure that it's done appropriately. Okay? Those are the kind of things that build relationships. Okay. So, questions at this point? We're almost out of time. Comments?
Like, what do you recommend? Like, if you have a client who's like, oh, I wish we could be friends, like in real life, and kind of like,
What do you answer?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. It's like, because, I have good rapport with this person, but like, sometimes she says things like this that like kind of make me uncomfortable, and then I don't.
Okay, the fact that it makes you uncomfortable, that's number one. You need to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Number two, look at the diagnostics. Okay, are there personality features? That coming from someone who has no psychiatric history and worked their way through the system to get into the hospital rather than go to prison is much different than someone who has a long history of being diagnosed and having the features of borderline personality disorder. So to answer that concretely, I can't because I don't know the person, but I would ask you to look at what in your relationship would cause that level of relaxation to say that, okay? And what are the diagnostics? And what purpose would it serve them? Like, what need do they think you can meet as their friend? What kind of qualities do you like in a friend, I guess? But then very clearly identifying your role, it can be really a conflict if friends are in a position where one makes a decision for another. That you can talk about that kind of stuff without saying, I can't be your friend, because that can be hurtful. Okay? So does that help at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really good example. So because it has to do with rapport, it has to do with relationship, and it has to do with what has gone on between the two of you up to this point. Sometimes somebody might want to be my friend because I've done for them what they can do for themselves. And sometimes they want to be my friend because I've given them more support than they've seen in all their 30 years. Okay. And so those are all things to think about. Okay. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? There are so many different examples that we all can give in our work experience and in our personal lives. Just don't ever forget that what we have in our personal life will always translate into our work life somehow. Okay? And the best way to maintain a professional therapeutic relationship is every time you come in contact with a client, picture an invisible door in between the two of you And I leave my stuff on this side, and when I leave their stuff on that side. And that's gonna help kind of clear the fog a little bit. Okay, then you don't have to worry about kicking the dog when you get home, or yelling at your spouse, or, you know. So, questions? Okay.
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I would make the comment that even if you're in the field for a long time,
Oh,
you're always learning.
oh, good God,
And even
yes.
like a discussion like today, there's just little things that you can pull out and go, oh, I think I'll try that. It's kind of a different thing than what I usually do. And that just makes you better and better at what it is
Absolutely.
you do.
You're always a work in progress. You know, I made mistakes early on in my career. The only difference 30 years later is that I made different ones. You know? And so, seriously, I mean, that's really a good point. You're always gonna make mistakes, you'll just make different ones. So the problem comes is when you make the same mistakes over and over and then you add the different ones, and then all of a sudden you're making all kinds of mistakes. And then damage occurs. The number one goal, and I put it at the very last sentence of the handout, is your job, bottom line, is to do no harm. That is the bottom line. Do no harm. And you've got the power to do harm. So, not that you will, not that you would intend to, but sometimes we cause harm when we don't need to. So we need to pay attention and be very mindful and present. Okay? All right. I really appreciate you guys coming today, and thank you. And if there's any comments or questions or anything, just get a hold of your supervisor who can get a hold of me, and we'll go through it.
There's a sign-up sheet there that needs to go all the way around.
Okay.
And then also via email, staff is going to get a log that I'll put it on today's seminar and what that log, how to fill out that log. We're going to email that to you, and then it's going to be your responsibility to keep tracking all of your own in-services for the rest of the year. And then probably about December 1st or 15th at the very latest, we're going to ask you to send that back to us. And we're going to ask that you also have a number of hours that you need for your particular job. So you guys with CCS, you're going to need at least 8 hours. So folks in the CBRF, like this one, she needs 15 hours. But if you're going to be responsible for tracking your own stuff, and you don't only just put down these in services, but it's anything else that you are actually doing through time. But it's just that you're going to have it on your computer, and you're going to send it back to us instead of us tracking as we go along. And if case managers want to do it, great. I don't think that there's a requirement that you have it out there, but we'll send it to you as well.
I think it's a great idea to track it, no matter who we are.
Right.
You know, it's kind of a reminder of what you know and what you don't know, and maybe what you have questions about, or, you know, progress you've made in certain areas. I mean, really.
Absolutely.
It can be a really good tool. So I'll be offering these right now twice a month, okay, from this location. And it'll come out in emails, you know, what the topics are. And again, if you guys have topics that you want addressed or that you really have questions about, some of them can be handled just as a question and answer, and other ones we can do an insert. So there's really no rules, okay? All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Oh,